In this video, I'm going to show you how to chamfer the ends of the tenons, as well as the top and bottom edges of both the top and the bottom. We'll also clean up the outside surfaces and prepare for glue up. We'll start by chamfering the ends of these through tenons. You could do a round over, you could do a chamfer. I think a chamfer looks nice, a little bit of a challenge too. One thing that we want to make sure though is we don't chamfer too far back. So you could even put yourself a little guideline there to make sure that you don't go too far. I'm actually not going to chamfer all the way back to that guideline. It's just there to help me know that I can't go beyond that. I'll show you how far we're going to chamfer. Let's just take this apart and we'll actually draw some guidelines on here by taking this and dividing the end of the tenon here into thirds or thereabouts. We'll divide that just like this using that same technique that we used earlier when we did the box. So we've divided the end of the tenon into thirds. And these are just guidelines here. You want to do a lot of it by eye too. I'm going to put this in the vise here, and we're going to start by chamfering this part. Again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but it is extremely important to make sure that you remember the straws, remember those fibers. So here's those fibers, those colorful straws here. We'll put them out like this, and I want to make sure that I work this way. If I try to chamfer it like this, they're all going to break. If I come across like that, they're all going to break. So I've got to come back like this. So I'm going to use the chisel here, and we're going to come straight in like this and chamfer. You see how clean that cuts it? Just nicely right there. We'll turn it over. We'll do the other side. Here, again, working like this. Now let's put it up on edge and we'll work this. Now there's several ways to do this. You could use a chisel, you could use a plane. You could use the plane using the same technique that we used when we started by chamfering the edge of the box. If you are going to use a chisel, it takes a little bit of control. You take your hand back here like this, hold the chisel between your thumb and your first finger, and you just bring it along just like this. This does require a little bit of control with the chisel, but it's a good practice, good exercise here. And I'm bringing that along. Then I can come along like this, shearing it, just like so. Now, I'm being very careful as I get towards the end because I want to make sure that I don't blow that part out there. So I'm going to turn this around so I can get a lower angle of attack here. So I can bring this in like this, get a lower angle of attack, and actually come up like that. You could actually use a block plane for this, which is a small plane, generally a low angle plane, which works nicely for end grain work. The reason why I recommend a block plane for this is it's a little bit smaller. You can hold it in your hand. It's easier to see what you're doing as you work this along. The technique is exactly the same, shearing it across the grain. And you can see we've got that nice little even chamfer to our little line there. And I'm trying to make sure that I get all the corners lined up there. And we'll do the exact same thing on this other side here. There we go. That'll make a nice end of a tenon. That'll fit nicely in there. And you can see the look that we're after there. Nice little chamfer right there. Before we start hand planing all of our parts, it's important that you mark which one is the left and which one is the right, because at this point we're going to plane away those marks. So I'm going to start by marking this one as the left, and what I like to do is I'll just transfer the marks here. I know this is the left. I'll just transfer those inside the joints. So I'll just mark this as left, and this one here is right. course, you could probably pick this up and you'd be able to tell where it's most important is on the shelf here, and I can mark that as left on the end and right on this end. This is important. Don't forget to do this because we're going to plane this off and then you won't know which way to put it. And this distance might be different because this is all scribe fit. Again, I've got the lower arched rail here, which it's quite obvious which is left and right, but for the sake of making this simpler, we'll just mark left and right on the part that's not going to be seen. Again, just at a glance, we can pick it up, left and right. And then the top and bottom. That is also very important because it'd be easy to get these confused. Which one is the top, which one is the bottom? Very easy. Let's just mark this here in the bottom. Right there, bottom L, we'll call it. That means bottom left. And this one here will be the top. And this is the left side, so we'll mark it right there inside there as top left. Now we can go ahead and chamfer the top and the bottom. And we'll start by just dividing this up into thirds. Again, I'm just using my eye, and these are just general guidelines. Now you see how I've locked my pencil between my thumb and my middle finger there, and you see how it's pressing up against there? That's the exact measurement that I want to use here. That will provide a perfect 45-degree chamfer. Okay, we'll do the same thing over here. We'll carry that line again, just like this. You can even do this without putting marks on there, but the marks are helpful. They're just helpful as a guideline. We'll do the same thing here. Again, my thumb is, rather my middle finger is resting against the workpiece. And we'll do the exact same thing on the bottom as well. The next step is to chamfer the end grain. And this is the exact same process that you did on the box. I'm assuming you've watched the videos on the box and you have both watched the videos and built the box. So now we're going to chamfer this end grain here using the 4.5 plane. We'll set the plane a little bit deeper because we're removing more material. Shearing across the grain like this, shearing it just like so. We'll work this side as well. A good sharp plane is very helpful, but also this technique. If you're getting these little curls like this, then you know you're shearing across the end grain, and that's exactly the cut that you want, those nice little curled end grain shavings. We'll go ahead and do the other end in the same exact fashion. Now I'm going to do the long grain here. Remember, when you're using a hand plane, don't put all your fingers in the plane like this. This cramps up your hand, and all the fingers are not meant to be in the plane. At least point this finger out. Occasionally, I'll even point my pinky out like this, so that relaxes the grip. You could even point all of your fingers out and just push the plane like this, especially for a more delicate cut. Now the goal here is for these chamfer lines to line up perfectly right there and right there. We'll come back here, we'll do the same thing on this one. I'm going to back the blade off, back it off, so I'm just taking a very, very fine cut, and we'll just come in here and clean those pencil marks up right there, nice and clean, nice chamfers right there. You can even come across the top, as long as the blade is backed off, as just taking a super fine shaving and shearing it across the top. You see how it's just whisper thin. Sometimes, in order to keep it from breaking off, I'll stop it and then come back from this side. But again, I'm shearing it. And now we'll do the other end. We'll do the exact same thing on the top as well. I've chamfered both the top and the bottom, all three edges, that is the front and the two ends. Now I want to surface my material. One thing I want to keep in mind here though is that we have fit this side into its corresponding dado, and it fits. If I hand plane it, I'm going to reduce it in thickness, so I have to be conscious of that. At least all of the areas where there is going to be a joint, in this case a dado joint, I've got to make sure that I don't reduce it too much in thickness, and I'll show you how you can keep from doing that. I'm going to start here. I know that the dado comes in right here, so I can start the actual cutter, the iron, right here, not off the board, but right in this area, and work it forward like this, and then stop it before I get off the edge of the board. So I can actually come in like this, and then lift up before I come off the edge of the board. And again, you can hear the plane is just taking a very, very, very slight amount off. It's easy sometimes for the plane to become dull, especially towards the end of a project. We're working in pine, and the blade doesn't tend to dull as fast. But if you're working in a hardwood, I've found that I'll have to sharpen oftentimes several times during the making of one project, even though it might be a small project. It really depends on how hard the material is, which will determine how often you have to sharpen your plane. How do you know when your plane needs to be sharpened? Well, you can feel it. You can feel if the surface is still smooth, silky smooth, then you should be fine. If the surface is a little bit rough, textured, then you might want to stop and resharpen. I'm going to go ahead and do all of the flat surfaces. Of course, the shelf is another one that I've got to make for certain that I don't thin out the ends too much. I've actually already hand planed this stock before doing the joinery. So I'm just really just touching it up at this point. I don't have to worry about thinning out the ends on the top and the bottom because the dados are cut into the top and the bottoms. So I can run right across the entire width or entire length of the top and the bottom. A few little nicks there that I want to take out. You'll also notice that I'm cleaning the shavings out. Sometimes if a stray shaving gets left in the plane, it'll leave an indention on the workpiece. There's a slight indention here that has been left due to a stray shaving, so I'm going to plane that out. Back the blade off just slightly, taking too much of a shaving off. There we go. Now that I've got all the surfaces done, I'm going to do the edges. In fact, I forgot here, we've got to do the surface of both the upper and lower arched piece. On the side with the shoulder, I can run all the way across. On the side that has no shoulder, I have to be certain that I start the plane in and then I stop the plane before going off the edge. Now that I've got all of the surfaces done, I'm going to go ahead and do the edges. I've got some pencil marks and layout marks and such, so I'm going to put this in the vise and do the edges. Nice and clean. As I've mentioned in some of the previous videos, I like to use a little bit of 220 grit sandpaper to just bring a consistency to all of the surface. And there might be some slight undulations in the surface. 220 sandpaper brings a consistent scratch pattern to all the surfaces, which does help in the finishing process. So you can just use some 220 grit sandpaper wrapped around a block of wood, working with the grain. And we'll work both surfaces here, and we'll work all of the surfaces.